Chapter 30. "So the plague is tied to the destroyer?" asked Sig. "I'm convinced it is the sign of Abaddon," said Lucas, "and Archdemon's hand certainly believes it is tied to the cult of the destroyer," added Jonathan. "But you didn't see anything?" Sig asked Stephanie. She shook her head and shrugged. Row 82 looked at her through the rear-view mirror with a disapproving look. She did not care, though. She would make short work of him. Jennifer pretended to sleep with her head nestled up against Victor's shoulder. Victor had ignored the conversation for the most part and focused on enjoying his proximity to the beautiful time-key bearer. Lucas turned to him. "I saw you again," said Lucas. "I did too," said Jonathan. "In fact, he was there the very first time I went into the mind realm." "Really?" asked Victor. "Wait, what?" asked Sig. "Victor seems to be showing up in visions," said Lucas. "Well, at least someone that looks like Victor." "What could that mean?" asked Sig. "I don't think it means I'm getting the Heaven's Shield key," said Victor. "I think that Sig will have that." "I don't care if I get a divine key," said Sig. Secretly he did want one, but his commitment to the cause of saving the world was not dependent on his having one. "I just wonder what that means." "If we have a destiny, it means that he will be important to it," said Lucas. "And if we don't have a destiny?" asked Jonathan. "Well, he's still important to helping us reach our goals," said Lucas as he turned to Victor. "I'm sorry for talking about you in the third person. You are important, and you've proven yourself time and again." "Thanks, Lucas," said Victor with a smile. Stephanie glanced up at the rearview mirror. Row 82 gave her another look of disappointment. She looked away and pretended to act casually, but she could not help but think on how there was one person with them that had not proven themselves, and she was a bit frustrated that the others had not noticed it. She bit her lip, forcing herself to focus on the pain. Row 82 had likely already perceived that she was lying. She could not afford to have her plans to kill him be perceived prematurely. After about an hour, the van came to a stop near the cluster of buildings from which they had originally borrowed it. Lizard leapt out of the door, refreshed and energized. The others slowly filed out. "Let's go," said Sig as he began moving up the mountain path. "Hopefully Daniel has found something to alleviate the plague." The others followed after him. The trip up was quiet. Only the sound of footsteps and heavy breathing filled the air. The sun began to set in the west, and the shadows grew long. The sound of crickets and frogs replaced the songs of small birds as night approached. The moon, nearly full, appeared up in the sky. "It's so amazing," whispered Jonathan as he looked in the sky. "Whatever," muttered Kirana. "Did you ever think that you would see the moon in one piece?" asked Jonathan. She looked up in the sky. The bright white glow did strike her with awe, although she tried to hide her amazement. "I never really thought about it," admitted Kirana. "Well, I never thought I would see it," said Jonathan. "You never thought you would leave the desert in the hot zone either," said Kirana softly. "No, I guess I didn't," said Jonathan with a smile. She turned away from him. She found him quite attractive in his long white cloak, with his smile reflecting the low light. "But I don't miss it," he added. "You don't even miss your hawk?" added Kirana. Jonathan smiled. "I would," he said, "but it seems like a part of her has stayed with me." Kirana looked at him skeptically. "What does that mean?" she asked. "When I use my key, I go into the mind realm," explained Jonathan, "which is like a world where I can see the minds of all people. Sam came with me, I guess." "You saw her?" asked Kirana. "But I thought she died." "I thought so too," said Jonathan. "But she is there. In fact, she was the one that helped me find you when Zeta 28's creature kidnapped you." Kirana's eyes widened. She remembered how impressed she had been when Jonathan stormed the base and saved her from becoming a genetically twisted version of Lizard. Her heart beat quicker. She hated this feeling. She tried to look away, but eventually turned back to Jonathan and smiled. "Tell her thank you next time you see her," said Kirana softly. Had Stephanie been watching, she would have been angry at how Jonathan and Kirana were looking at one another. As it was, she could not keep herself from watching Row 82. She had been wondering why she had seen him walk into the cave alone in her vision. Why had he not been accompanied by the others? She was determined not to let him get ahead. Daniel's life was at stake. After a few hours, they made camp. Lizard volunteered to keep watch, and Sig offered to join him. Stephanie kept a close eye on Row 82 as he fell asleep. Intensely watching him had taken a toll on Stephanie, and the dancing flames in the campfire made her eyelids feel heavier. She pinched herself to force herself to stay awake, but to her surprise, her key began glowing, and she slipped out of consciousness. Her vision took her back to the cavern where Daniel Young was working, fastening tubes together. She turned to look at the opening. Eventually, Row 82 came into the door. As he looked at Daniel, he suddenly pulled out his rifle. "Stop!" screamed Stephanie. Row 82 suddenly fell down. She wondered what she had done to stop him. An instant later, she sat up. The fire had gone out. Sig and Lizard were speaking softly to one another. She whirled around, but noticed that Row 82 was missing. She pulled out her tablet and typed furiously. "Where is Row 82? She asked. "He decided to scout ahead a bit," said Sig. "Yeah," agreed Lizard. "Kind of pointless, since I already did, but whatever." Stephanie typed furiously. "He's the traitor," said Stephanie through her tablet. "He's going to kill Daniel." "What?" exclaimed Lizard. The others stirred, except for Jennifer, who was sound asleep. "We have to stop Row 82, said Stephanie. Lizard grabbed his key and teleported away. The others, except for Victor and Jennifer, rushed up the mountain. Victor tried to gently shake Jennifer's arm, but she remained asleep. Lizard teleported into the cavern and found Daniel connecting a series of tubes between the metal beds throughout the cavern. "Doctor," said Lizard. "You startled me, Lizard," said Daniel as he leapt to his feet. "I'm sorry about that," said Lizard with air quotes. "Have you seen Row 82? "The augment?" asked Daniel nervously. "No. Should I have?" "Stephanie had a vision about him," said Lizard with air quotes. "He's going to try to kill you." Daniel appeared confused. "Really?" he asked. "Stephanie saw that?" "Yes," said Lizard. "Thank goodness you've come here before him then, Lizard," said Daniel. Outside, Row 82's shriek echoed through the mountains. He paused and listened carefully. As the sound returned, he could see Lizard and Daniel inside the cavern. He looked carefully at Daniel and clenched his fists. His eyes and key began glowing as he watched the two of them. "I can see what you're doing, Doctor," whispered the augment. "I suppose it is not so bad to have the power of a divine key." Row 82 crept closer to the mouth of the cave and pulled out his rifle. He knew he would have to move very slowly so as not to be detected. He slowed his breathing and his pulse seemed to calm. He stepped cautiously into the cavern. None of the patients were conscious any longer, and there were no moans of pain. The only sound that echoed through the cavern was the dripping of water from the various cave formations. The ambient light of the cave gave greater clarity to Row 82's vision, but he tapped his mirrored key to ensure he did not miss anything. A blue glow emanated from the stalagmites and stalactites throughout the cavern. The thousands of metal beds seemed to glow as well, although not as bright as the patients lying on top of them. Suddenly a new sound caused him to whirl around in horror. The others were climbing the mountain. Row 82 saw Stephanie leaping up the trail. Her rage was visible to the augment, and even without his key, he knew it was directed toward him. He frowned, knowing that if he was to succeed, he would need to move quickly. He turned back to the cave and pointed his weapon in. Although he was not visually in range of the doctor, he could still see him using his power of perception, but he could no longer see Lizard. "Perhaps he teleported," whispered Row 82. "Lizard could be anywhere." Row 82 concluded that Lizard was capable of learning Row 82's plan. He decided he was not losing anything by giving another shriek to see if he could locate the space key bearer. The shrill sound of the augment's voice echoed through the cavern. He listened carefully, creating a mental image to add depth and clarity to the picture his key gave him. As he looked, he suddenly saw someone on the ground at the edge of the cavern and gasped. Not willing to wait another moment, he rushed into the cavern. "Row 82!" called Sig. The others had just come up the trail. Though they were breathing heavily from the exhausting run up the mountainside, adrenaline propelled them toward the mouth of the cave. Stephanie was about to enter when the sound of Row 82's rifle made her freeze. She clenched her fists and drew her pistol. Though she had been too late to prevent Row 82 from shooting Daniel, she was determined that she would avenge the doctor. Rushing into the cave, she was surprised to see Row 82 lying on the ground, with blood flowing from a hole in his gut. He had lost consciousness. The feeling of relief rushed over Stephanie as she looked and found Daniel connecting tubes. He turned and saw her standing and gave her a smile. "You came to save me, my dear," said Daniel. "Thank you." Stephanie smiled and nodded. The others rushed into the room. Though they gasped for breath, their faces also showed relief to see Row 82 lying on the cavern floor. Daniel smiled. "You all came to save me," said Daniel. "We thought he might have gotten you," said Sig. "He nearly did," replied Daniel, "but I think I'll be all right now." Daniel looked around. "Where are Jennifer and Victor?" asked Daniel. "Jennifer didn't want to wake up," said Lucas with a frown. Daniel laughed. Stephanie wondered how anyone could have slept through her rush to stop Row 82 from killing Daniel. "She's kind of lazy," said Lucas with a frown. The others laughed softly. Though she was lazy, it was not slothfulness that kept her asleep. Back down at the camp, Jennifer was dreaming of her conversation with the destroyer before he had killed Drew Baker. The words of the creature kept going through her mind. "You helped me become Abaddon. You made me who I am. I came from the same place you did." She thought on these words over and over, hoping for some clue that might reveal the truth. Because of her conversation with Aaron Pratt, she knew that there would be a betrayer in the council, and that she would be the one to know them. As she dreamt, she considered Row 82. Of course his motives were suspect, and of course he was capable of killing, but she decided that she did not really know him, and she had not helped him become who he was. Who had she helped? Of course she had learned new ways to harness her powers, helping Lizard in her first encounter with Felix Light. Also, Lizard had killed people before too. He had been susceptible to manipulation by Zeta-28, as well as Felix. Was it possible he was the betrayer with no intentions? On the other hand, Joshua Beckman's insanity had already filled the no intentions description. Could it be someone who meant well? Was Kirana's stubbornness, or Stephanie's grief, or even Sig's forgiveness vulnerable to being turned as a weapon against them? Jonathan had the Soul Key, a power which had already driven one guardian to become a murderer, and Victor had no key at all. She reluctantly tried to suppress her feelings for him, as she considered whether he might be capable of harming them, knowingly or unknowingly. Then there was Daniel Young, the benevolent but cranky physician who loved to lecture people on the importance of helping others and that every life had a purpose. She had slowed time to preserve his life in the cave before coming to the Golden Age. Even now she knew he was working to discover the cause of the sleeping sickness. She realized she had forgotten all about the sleeping sickness. She strained to see if she could squeeze any repressed memories regarding the mysterious genetic affliction from before she had traveled to the future. She thought back to Lucas's statement on their drive to the mountains. The plague was the sign of Abaddon. The words of the destroyer returned to her mind. "You made me who I am." She thought about it again and again until not only the words, but the voice seemed familiar. Certainly the sound was darker, lower, and twisted, but she recognized the voice. Jennifer woke with a start and sat up. She looked Victor in the eye and grabbed his hand. Her skin was cold and clammy, and sweat beaded on her forehead. Victor was surprised at the intensity in her gaze. "What is it?" he asked. "I had a dream," she said softly. "I know who the traitor is, who the destroyer is." "Stephanie already figured it out," said Victor calmly. "It's Row 82. They went to stop him." "It's not Row 82, said Jennifer in a horrified voice. "What?" exclaimed Victor in shock. "We have to get up there," said Jennifer. She stood up and grabbed her key. Her eyes began glowing brightly. Time moved slowly as they rushed up the mountain. The others were still chuckling about Jennifer's laziness when she suddenly appeared in the cave. "Jennifer!" gasped Jonathan. "Awkward," said Lucas softly. Though Jennifer was exhausted, she caught her breath and looked around. "Where's Lizard?" she asked. The others had forgotten about him. "Yeah, where is Lizard?" asked Sig. "He went out to look for Row 82 before he came in," explained Daniel. "I'm sure he'll be back soon." "Shut up!" shouted Jennifer angrily. The others became silent. They had never heard Jennifer get angry before. "What's wrong, my dear?" asked Daniel. "Don't call me that," snapped Jennifer. "And tell me what you did to Lizard." Daniel had a surprised look on his face. The others looked at one another in shock. "What are you saying?" asked Daniel. "Yeah," added Sig. "What are you saying?" "Row 82 was not the traitor," said Jennifer intensely. "But he tried to kill Daniel," said Stephanie through her tablet. "But he failed, obviously," said Victor. "Tell us how you killed Row 82. Where is your gun?" "So what if he did kill Row 82? Stated Stephanie through her tablet. "Stephanie is right. There's no need to start doubting each other," said Daniel. "I deeply regret having to kill Row 82. You know how precious life is to me." Daniel slowly reached down and picked up a length of tube. "If his life is so precious," said Jennifer, "use your key and heal him." Daniel cleared his throat softly. The others watched him to see what he would do, and were surprised to see him stand motionless. At last Lucas stepped up and spoke. "How did you kill him, Doctor?" asked Lucas curiously. Daniel suddenly stuck the tube he was holding into his gut and winced in pain. Everyone gasped in shock. "What are you doing?" exclaimed Sig. "Every life is precious," said Daniel slowly. "Every life has a purpose." The bodies of the plague victims on the beds began to tremble slightly at first, then shook uncontrollably. "Every life has value." "Shoot him!" cried Jennifer. Victor drew his weapon, but Daniel raised his hand and a beam of dark purple energy flew from his hand and pierced Victor's shoulder, causing him to drop his pistol. There were gasps of horror from everyone. Jennifer rushed to Victor's side. "What was that?" whispered Jonathan. "That's not the power of a divine key," shouted Jennifer angrily. Stephanie looked down at Row 82 in horror. She suddenly realized that she had let her personal feelings toward the augment prevent her from seeing the truth. She had made a terrible mistake. "What are you doing, Daniel?" asked Sig in confusion. Daniel laughed. "Foolish Sig," said Daniel. "This is destiny. You were never meant to redeem humanity. You were meant to bring me here. I am the destroyer." Sig remembered him using the phrase, "This is destiny," when he had stayed behind with the plague victims. Sig pulled out his pistol in anger and fired a round, but a dark purple flame flew up and swallowed the bullet, protecting Daniel from harm. "You're a doctor!" shouted Lucas in shock and horror as Daniel pulled the Heaven's Breath key from around his neck and tossed it on the ground. "There was a purpose to living as a doctor, but the purpose has been fulfilled. "These plague victims," said Daniel. His voice grew lower and seemed to echo more. "Their lives also had purpose, but now their purpose is to serve me. The power of human sacrifice is not meant to be wasted on petty demon keys or ensuring the survival of the fittest. I will use it for something far greater." Suddenly the people on the metal beds burst into dark flames, and energy flowed through the tubes that led to the long tube in Daniel's gut. "The tubes!" cried Lucas. "Cut them!" Kirana and Jonathan leapt to try and cut the tubes with their swords, but a pair of dark cutting beams from Daniel's outstretched hands pierced through their bodies and left them unconscious and bleeding on the floor. "Thank you for not reading my mind while we were together, Jonathan," said Daniel with a morbid laugh. "It would have been difficult to get this far if you had known what I planned to do." "Stop it!" shouted Sig as he charged toward Daniel. Daniel pierced him through the chest with a dark beam of energy, leaving a wound that gushed blood as Sig dropped onto his face. Lucas pulled out his 12-gauge shotgun and fired off several rounds. Stephanie began firing her pistol. Dark flames leapt up and swallowed the projectiles, leaving Daniel completely unscathed. Victor tried to pull Jennifer back to cover so she would be safe, but she resisted so that she could stay with the others. "You were both so eager to believe that the augment was the traitor," said Daniel with a laugh. "It is ironic that he saw me for what I was before you." In another instant, he cut the two of them down. Lucas and Stephanie collapsed helplessly as their blood sprayed onto the cavern floor. Consciousness left them almost immediately. "No more!" shrieked Jennifer. She grabbed her key and rushed toward him. He raised his hands toward her, but she vanished as she slowed time for herself. Noticing that she had disappeared, Daniel pointed his hand toward Victor and fired a beam. "Slow this down, Jennifer Cedar," he chided. Jennifer suddenly appeared standing in between Victor and Daniel, hoping to protect Victor, but the power of his energy beam cut them both down. As Jennifer fell to the ground, she looked and saw Lizard lying at the edge of the cave. He looked like he was already dead. She took one more look up and watched as Daniel made the final transformation. He became the monster that she remembered. As he drained the life from the thousands of people lying helplessly on beds throughout the cavern, purple flames erupted from his skin. Claws emerged from his twisting fingers as his flesh was consumed with dark energy. In an instant, she realized how long he had been working toward this end. He had worked tirelessly to help the council gather divine keys, knowing that he needed to come back in time. He had invested in preserving human life, only to be able to take many lives at once for his profane ritual. She remembered how the beast had mocked her before killing Drew Baker, saying that he had come from the same place as her, and that she had helped him become who he was. Only now, when it was too late, did she fully understand what he had meant. She watched blood flow out of her body onto the cavern floor and turned back to Victor. A tear ran down her cheeks as she lost consciousness. The destroyer had been born. Abaddon had been unleashed.